This might be one of the wildest EV stories I've come across in a fair while. A GM EV1 from obviously Who Killed the Electric Car, the car that GM swore would never ever be sold to the public, has just legally been sold at auction. It's the only one that has ever been legally sold. And the crazy part, the starting bid was $800, which is pretty cool. I'm sure a lot of people were very excited. So $800. Didn't sell for that in the end, obviously, and the final sale price ended up being just over 100 grand US, 104,000 US dollars for a 27-year-old electric car with no batteries, by the way. Even the 12-volt battery not there. And most people don't think they even exist anymore because they never sold them, GM. They just let them out via a lease and then collected them back. One guy, who was the guy who had this green one, he had it leased by them, sent it to get repaired, but they refused to send it back to him. And I think he tried to take them to court or something like that, and it failed, basically. So that's not the end of the story. It's an incredibly interesting story. I do encourage you to go check the video out because it's a fascinating video. The guys over at Elektrek Garage have their own, have their hands on one, and they're now restoring a piece of EV history. It's even a cool colour too. Nice, you know, kind of almost like a British racing green, but metallic, isn't it? And it was never really supposed to survive in the first place. Let's jump into it. Hello folks, my name is Ben Alexander. Thank you very much for tuning in. I really appreciate your time, especially for all the people being patient, all the people on Patreon and YouTube members and that sort of stuff. You can buy me a coffee as well. Thank you to anyone who's a part of it and who's a member. These are the channel members. I'll put them on screen now. I'm obviously busy. I literally was covered in paint a few hours ago, and I'm literally still painting things and fixing. The fence is almost finished, by the way, so very excited to get that finished. So now, if you're a younger person, maybe, I don't know, under 30 or something like that, under 30, maybe under 25, and you're kind of into EVs, newer EVs, I know most of you aren't under 30 actually, but yeah, you might not fully understand how big this car is. The GM EV1. The GM EV1 wasn't just an early EV, it was the early EV. It was a big deal, and it was the 90s. No Teslas, no BYD. There's basically no public chargers or anything like that. No battery gigafactories. Lithium-ion chemistry was pretty new. Like it wasn't that commonplace, to be quite honest, even though it did exist. Obviously no fast chargers. GM built these things as a real electric car, not as a compliance car, and not a prototype. It was a real pedestrian-ready electric vehicle, and people loved them. And I can see why. And then they leased them out to customers in California and Arizona. They used lead-acid batteries at first, and then later a nickel metal battery or hybrid battery. And then they were not overly slow, and they were very ahead of their time. They were, you know, in the 90s, they were a very compelling car actually for a lot of people. And then GM recalled them all in. They took them away from people. There were lots of people picketing, a lot of aggression. People were very angry about it. And they basically trucked most of them, almost all of them actually, to a desert. And they crushed them. And it annoyed a lot of people because it's kind of a, you know, it's meant to be a kind of green car. Back in the day, that's what they would have said more commonly than they do now. And they were crushing them, and they were only a couple of years old. They were very new, so they didn't want them on the road. They didn't want liability. They didn't want spare parts sat in a warehouse that they had to have. And they didn't want the future of EVs to be accelerated by accident. So the EV1 became this very big monumental symbol, in a word, a symbol of everything that went wrong with early electric cars. The documentary Who Killed the Electric Car was basically built around it, and most people genuinely believed GM had destroyed every single one, that you know, that none of them could be ever legally sold. And a few ended up in museums actually, and not many. I think it was like 10 or 20 or something like that. It was almost none. And they had their powertrains removed, the electronics were faffed around with so that they couldn't be reused, and they even took certain parts out, I think such as the BMS and that sort of thing, obviously with the batteries. And they were really just the physical embodiment of the car rather than the full car itself. But then this happened, and EV1 slipped through the cracks in a pretty fantastic way, really. It's not complete, it's not even running, but I think it does have the motor with it, and it is an intact EV1, apart from a massive hole in the windscreen. Obviously, it's pretty bad. VIN number 212 turned up in the hands of a private seller through a very unusual series of events. It was put up into an auction, and the starting bid, according to the people who tracked it, was $800. Imagine being the first person to bid on an EV, even just bidding on it for $850. The honour that you'd feel bidding on it would be brilliant, wouldn't it? And it's one of the rarest electric cars in the world, the only one ever sold. Of course, things escalated quickly, very, very quickly after that, and yeah, it was never going to sell for $5,000 or $10,000. Clearly, collectors jumped in, EV nerds jumped in, people who had driven or leased an EV1 back in the day were watching this like it was a Super Bowl or something like that. Because keep in mind, this is the first and only one in history ever to be sold legally to a private owner. Not crushed, not going to a museum, not to a university. And it sold for $104,000 US. But I'm not sure if that's before or after any of the costs that the the bidder would have to pay, I guess, or the person who sold it would have to pay. But honestly, it could have been higher. Honestly, I reckon they could do it up and they could sell it for many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars, I would imagine. So you can't find another one, obviously. So they have to get a windscreen custom made for it. And this is literally the only one legally in private hands. Now, here's where the story gets even better. The Elektrek Garage team, and if you haven't watched them, definitely they're brilliant, you should watch them. They're now restoring it and putting it back to use. They're not even telling people where it is or where they're located or anything like that. It's in a sort of private garage somewhere. And they're opening it up, showing the internals, looking at the 1990s battery management system, or the wiring and how it's all packaged, analysing the aerodynamics, and even going to try to get the original charger system to work again, because they've got the original charger, and it's kind of like an archaeological dig for electric cars, and it's insanely cool to watch. Like, I've never seen anything like it at all. I mean, the closest would be a Sandy Munro video, but they're a much more complex beast. So the EV1 was way more advanced than people realise. It doesn't really look it, to be honest, when you look at the chipboards that they used, they were very much 1990, kind of like the back of a calculator. These days, it's way more detailed than that. It's incredibly, they're incredibly detailed. The EV1, much more advanced than people realised anyway, and it had a drag coefficient of 0.19 in my, that's what I'm sure it was, 0.19, pretty sure. That is lower than a Tesla Model S. That's lower than a Mercedes EQS. It had an aluminium construction, a heat pump HVAC system before heat pumps were even mainstream, and a fully integrated motor and inverter unit that feels quite modern, actually. Not by today's standards, but definitely for mid-90s, 1996. That is mad. And the thing drove beautifully. Everybody really raved on about how good they were to drive, and people who drove them back then said that it was much more smoother than pretty much any other car you could get. And I'm not sure if that's a really valuable thing that they said, but maybe, maybe some of them were car people. So watching a team in 2025 strip one apart and bring it back to life, show you the internals and fix it and that sort of stuff, it's it's like watching the lost ancestor of modern electric cars wake up. So for me, the most interesting part is what this says about the value of rare EVs. Not monetary value either. A lot of people assume older EVs are worthless because the batteries degrade or because they rely on outdated charging standards. But the EV1 just sold for over 100 grand. It didn't even have batteries, and it's an electric car. So I think that's pretty interesting, honestly. That's how significant this is to a lot of people. I would have paid a lot of money for it, and I would have, for sure, imported it. I just would have. I didn't even know it was being sold. So the EVs can have collector value in the same way that old petrol cars do. We just haven't really gotten to that point for so many people yet. I mean, obviously in the UK, the Nissan Leaf, that's not a collector's car. The G-Wiz, that's not a collector's car. So maybe not every car will become a classic, obviously. And I think that's going to be kind of only the very specific, the very cool ones, because even the GM EV, that was pretty rare, but they sold a few of those. But that's not really even a collector's car at this point, is it? So What is? I wonder what is. What do you think is a collector's electric vehicle? I'm really curious to know. So, historically, the important ones absolutely will. The EV1 is one of a very short list, and I think, and it might be the most historically important electric vehicle sale of all time, up to date, I should imagine. So it also raises the question: what else is out there that we think is gone? Are there prototypes sitting in barns? Are there early test mules from Tesla Roadsters or anything like that, sat in like Utah or something? And that would be really crazy to have a look at in 10, 20 years if we found them and it was just sat there. So we're so early in the EV era that we haven't really even seen the beginning of the collector EV market. That's an interesting thing to realise, isn't it? And I think the EV1 sale might be the first big... I shouldn't say big spark, that's a little bit cheesy, isn't it? But maybe it's the first moment, really. It's a suggestion of a market with an electric vehicle that's, it's going to be a bit of a special one. So here's what I think about this. GM spent millions making sure that nobody could own an EV1. They literally shafted lots of customers and they crushed them all in a desert, and they stole some back from customers, literally even halfway through being repaired for the customer, and refused to send them back and crushed them. So they were I think, they were buggers, basically, and they did everything they could to stop these cars from living on. But now, not only has one survived, it's legally in private hands, it's being restored, it's being studied, it's been filmed for millions to see. I think the video is not very old, only a couple of days old. It's had 150,000 views. And it's almost poetic. It's beautiful. What a nice way to end the year, I think. So I hope they make lots of content and videos, and I hope they put it out so we can all kind of watch it. The electric car GM tried very, very hard to kill has now become one of the most valuable EVs in America, and it will only go up, I should imagine. What do you think? Would you pay 100 grand for an EV1 if you had the money? Actually, that's a good question, isn't it? Would you pay 100 grand if you had 100 grand spare for that EV1? A broken one with no batteries, it's buggered, and the electronics have been, they've been on purpose, they've been turned off, and the windscreen's half buggered, so you have to spend a couple of grand getting a custom one made. Do you think GM regrets crushing them now that the world has gone electric? They did say once that they think it cost them a decade of of progression, basically, and they think it was a bit of a mistake. That's what they've said since doing it. But at the time, I think obviously they felt like that's what they had to do for whatever reason, and there was a lot of politics around it. And what other EVs do you think will become collectibles in the future? Name one or two, if you've got one or two, because it's a really interesting question. And I don't mean converted Beetles or anything like that. Let me know in the comments. Very, very interested to see what people are thinking about this. I think it's fascinating. I just think it's the coolest thing to happen almost at the end of the year. What a lovely way to wrap it up, because it's been a bit of a hectic year for so many people, and the car market's mad. What a nice little bit of a story. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next video.